Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of A Matter of Trust. This is Patrick, and I am Yeshua. Today, we are going to talk about judgment. And I proposed this because I was listening to some of our content, and I realized, we talked a lot about judgment. And we actually also managed to judge. so I thought, okay, you know what? Let's do something about this. Let's talk about it and see what comes up. Explore the topic. So, Patrick, first and foremost, I would like to just ask you how you are today.
Kind of good. I got up early, so I was tired because I just got up earlier than usual, and then took a nap, and then I feel really good. I allowed myself. It was like a surrender.
Right. Awesome. Yeah. So yeah, and I also have a great day. I woke up actually. Yeah, I slept a little bit more actually today, and it was nice. You know, at the moment I sleep in the house with a family, so there's a little kid running around. So in the morning he comes in, like sneaking in, and he's being like, Shua, and he's trying to wake me up sometimes, you know, but usually he respects me sleeping. But yeah, so anyways, let's jump into it. So the first question that we have, that we want to discuss a little bit about, is the when do we judge? And I was giving some thought to this because for me, the when and the why is kind of the same thing for me. Because let me give an example of the ways we judge to kind of put it in perspective. So, for example, we judge when we do not understand another person that we're speaking to or being around, or a person that has certain patterns that we really don't recognize or maybe won't recognize within ourselves. That's one way of judging. Also, we have a tendency as humans to judge people that are doing some kind of thing that we are really good at, but they don't do it as good as we do. We have a tendency of judging that because you have like a certain proud in being good at doing something. So you also have like an egoic tendency to kind of judge people on because you're comparing your skills to other people's skills. And just having those two in mind, for example, is also a why we judge. It's when we judge, it's the when we judge, and it's also the why. Also, we judge when we become passionate about trying to convince others to do things relative to our standards. When we have certain standards and certain things that works very well for us, we kind of also have a tendency of judging people in that way. What do you think about that? Do you recognize these things that I'm saying?
I recognize very much, especially the first one, when we don't understand. And yes, judgment is going on all the time. Because what my first thought when I thought of the question, when do we judge, was, okay, it's basically when we decide if something is good or bad, or any type of label that we can put on it. And I guess we kind of maybe need it in life sometimes to make it easier, but I'm sure it's often worth postponing to decide completely on how that behavior a person is doing, or whether it is really good or really bad, or I mean, in many cases it's just not that clear. Obviously, if someone is violent, hitting someone aggressively, I'm not gonna say, hey, wait, don't say that it's bad. But there will always be the fact that you cannot say the person is a violent person. They were violent at that moment. So the judgment could be for the moment, but the judgment maybe shouldn't be for the whole person and their entire way of living. This is something I think happens a lot. We see a certain behavior, I know if I judge, I judge sometimes this, and I have to be careful not to do it. I try to be aware of it because I see someone being in a certain way, and I get the impression that's how they are. And if I'm not careful reminding myself, I might just remember them as that. And every time I think of them, I could be like, oh, this is how they are. But no, I try to remind myself that every time I meet a person again, for example, it could be another day, a new side of this person that I'm going to see. So, and then over time, I will see how people develop. This is just what it makes me think about.
Right, and I think you bring up a really good point about there's not only like negative judgment, there's also actually the positive judgment. You can judge a person to be a good for a moment, and you think he's like that maybe, and for the rest of the week he's a fucking jackass, you know, and you know, yeah. So judgment also goes in the positive direction, indeed. Yeah, interesting. So, when do you personally judge? Is there any specific moments when you're like, okay, I have a tendency of judging these kind of people, or this moment? It could also be yourself, you know, like you could have like moments where you judge yourself.
There's definitely a lot of judgment going on towards myself. I actually think that every time I judge and I discover that I judge, and maybe it's someone else that I judged, and I stop myself, I see it as an indicator that, hey, if you can do that, Patrick, it means you could also judge yourself. So, I mean, it's just, it can happen all the time. Every time I don't know, I go to yoga. This month I started doing a lot of yoga, and there are different classes, different lessons. And for example, I've been doing a very calm one called Yin Yoga, and another less calm one called Hatha. Then the Yin, very calm, I've been wondering, should I maybe not do it so much because it will make me less proactive? If it makes me relaxed, then I was like, maybe it's just seeing another side of me that I have to embrace. And so I try to wait before I call it, before I decide what it is and whether it should be labeled something that makes me less proactive or not. But it helps, of course. This judgment helps us to simplify life sometimes, or we think, at least we can think it helps us. And then we can say, this is a box here for that, another box for that, or this person or something. Yeah. So with the yoga, I have to. I just saw that I'm on my way to maybe judge it, but I'm trying to wait, and just have more examples of me being in different states while I'm going to these different sessions, and see if results vary or experiences vary.
That's really inspiring, that kind of way of approaching it. I think it's really something that I would also like to be even better at, you know, going straight forward into these kind of things. I have an example actually that really resembles that.
Mm-hmm.
And that is when I moved to this place where I'm living right now. I was kind of skeptic about the whole situation, and I think it was last week actually, I was about to pack my bags and leave because I was like, this is just this is just too much, you know. There's so much shit going on here. I don't know if I can take it. And then I realized, okay, well, let's look at the patterns here, because I've been some places, and every time I went to some place, for example, Italy, it was kind of an escape. Well, Italy was not the escape actually, but there was something that I was running from because I couldn't confront it in the moment, and I didn't feel like I could, at least. And so I looked into that, just introspection, writing on the blog, asking myself the questions, just picturing God talking to me at the same time. And so I'm having a conversation with God, my higher self. And what I realized was that, okay, well, I want to leave, and I wanted to go back to Italy. And I was like, why? Nothing has changed really in those parameters that I want to change before I even go there again. And I was like, now maybe I should look into if I'm trying to run away from anything, and see if there's like a part of myself that I'm a little bit uncomfortable with. And so I looked into it and I realized, this actually is the case. I'm just in a very pressurized situation. Okay, well, I'm here and this is a family. I know I'm gonna have a family at some point. Why am I trying to run? This is what my dad did, I realized. And I made a promise to myself not to end up like that in case of not being too much around his kids in an age where it was pretty crucial that the father is around. Not that he was a bad father, he wasn't, I don't think so, but he just wasn't present. And I was like, okay, well, this is a situation that I'm just gonna have to handle. I'm just gonna have to sit with it and know that I'm on the right path being here, because there's so many signs everywhere for it to be in the right place. It makes logically no sense at all, but it's there. It's there. I see it in the signs, and my heart is very clear about what it wants to do and where it wants to be right now. And that's where I am right now. So I definitely recognize what you're sharing with me right now.
That's a good example also.
Yeah. Specifically, why do we think we judge?
Well, I think it's linked to our brain wanting to create patterns and wanting to know our environment and wanting to see patterns to make life easier, so it doesn't have to all the time analyze so and consider again and again if something is this or that, good or bad, or so it's kind of like saving a little bit of processing power for the brain to say, okay, now I dare label this as a specific thing, a specific experience, and I can expect that it's usually or always like that. And then we don't have to think about it. Then we can sort of park it, and we just live. We can go on and live life with that judgment in place, or that label in place, and then sometime it was fine, and it was maybe kind of correct. Of course, some might be easy to see that it's beneficial. Let's say that you. Let's say that you walked out in front of a car, and it hit you, and it hurt. you survived, fine, but then you judge the situation and say, and now I label going in front of the car as something not to do because it'll cause me pain. In that case, it seems fine. Okay, the brain is doing a good job, and many brains will even have judged the situation before anything bad happens. It will actually see a pattern before the pain. So it's helpful, but yeah, not always. But I think it's the brain trying to simplify by seeing patterns and labeling people and situations, experiences.
Right. That's a good take. I kind of am reminded of what it says in the Bible, that if you I was thinking about this thing about judging others and judging yourself. It says that there is if you judge others, you're gonna have to experience that yourself. Essentially, I'm paraphrasing it all, but it's kind of like that. And I thought that was very interesting. Very interesting.
Can you reset your video, because it's frozen here?
Oh, interesting. I think
Okay.
yours did the same for me.
Okay, so maybe it's just now you're back.
Right, and now I also have a new setup, so it might be something about that. So, yeah. Anyways, it was probably a beautiful freeze, I would guess. So it's all right with me. From my experience, I've tested it out to see, okay, how much water does this hold, to see, okay, if I judge others for what they do, is this something that happens to me? And just being observant of the whole thing, not trying to engage with it or anything, just being observant of that thing. I realized that there is some truth to it. Because when you judge others, you actually also judge yourself, because who are you? Like the highest form of yourself, who are you? You are each and every one also. And all the trees and all the buildings and everything. So when you judge others, you also judge yourself. You judge something from what you think in your small constricted individuality, by what you think is the right thing to do. But you forget like this whole order of self. So you kind of mistake the individuality for the self, and the self is everything. And this was very interesting for me to really go into, because then I also was able to accept when I judged and not to try to fix a lot of things. Because essentially, well, I'm not always in control of it. I completely admit that. We have thoughts that just jumps in, and they can come from all sorts of old paradigms and from all sorts of people that we have been with. But we can choose to be in a state of acceptance and forgiveness for the situation, because by doing that, you also kind of take your responsibility for it, and you get power to change that within you.
I feel like adding a bit to what you said about this, we judge ourselves when you judge others, because we are all one, and this thought, we are all one, I know for myself that it can seem like what are you talking about, but just to say that on the path to realizing, or to accepting, or at least accepting to play with the thought that we are all one, then with the case of judgment, if we walk around judging something, let's say a person with a tattoo is aggressive person, I don't know, something weird. I know that that I grew up in a place where people with tattoos, for some reason, they were a bit judged, and then if I have these thoughts, then I can also, in my worldview, it's the truth that, oh, people have these thoughts, because obviously it's a thought to have. So if I have these thoughts about people with tattoos, I'm also gonna expect, maybe I'm not so conscious about it, but I am also expecting then that others will have these thoughts about tattoos, people with tattoos. And this is kind of like, okay, it's a step toward, we are all connected. It's all sort of one, because you cannot have thoughts you send out there, judgments you make, and then at the same time believing that nobody else are doing that no other judgments are being sent out. It's going to be part of the whole belief system if I do that. I met several people with tattoos that were very, very nice. So it's just to say.
It had to be there. I also thing to speak to when you're saying what you do is that our thoughts is not completely ours. We have a tendency of saying, my thoughts, I'm thinking, and in reality, the thoughts is not ours per se. We didn't produce those thoughts. They were already there. We just connected with them. They were already thought somehow. And I think it's important to realize, if you really want to get rid of the judgment part of it in your life and really be in acceptance of you being as you are and others being as they are, and not judging anything in between or around that, is to know that the thoughts that you have is not yours. It's actually just the collective thought. And there's these, the way I see it, is that there's these bubbles, great bubbles of energy. And collectively, we have a big bubble, and there's a lot of small bubbles inside those. And inside the big collective, there's smaller groups of bubbles, which is people with tattoos or people who smokes or stuff like that. And they have thoughts that are repeated over and over again, like sort of algorithm, a group of data that we connect to in relative to who we are around and who we listen to, and what kind of things we study, what kind of books we read, what kind of videos we watch, what kind of feed we have on Facebook, or all those kind of things. I just wanted to put it there. It may be a bit complicated because it's a deepening process into like the more esoteric sciences or even mystic approaches to life and understanding of it. But it's really helpful because it helps you to look more simply at life and also not take too much into you, and be aware of your boundaries, essentially. What is you and what isn't.
And so by creating this image or the metaphor or image with the bubbles or this visualizing that, it's kind of like zooming out and not just being caught up in it, but actually having a concept, a way of looking at it, which can help us not to identify with it and maybe think an extra. Be aware and be conscious about.
And you're completely right about like this zoom out thing, because it's really that, like going from an individuality and thinking that your thoughts are only your thoughts and it's just yours, and zooming out and see, there's actually people around me that think the same thoughts. The more I study into this, the more I understand this in myself and others. And when you go even further out, you can see where it stemmed from. You can see like the whole culture around that. And then you can think, okay, well, you can just keep on zooming out and seeing that there's greater collectives of thought processes and ways of thinking, ways of resonating with specific messages. It's very interesting, this zooming out and how you mentioned the example of one step out, another step out, and you see that we're not just isolated with all these thoughts and emotions, ideas. It's so linked to others and environment also around us. It can get complex, but that's the fun thing about that. It can be complex, yes, if you keep on zooming out. But at some point, when you've zoomed out so much, we actually talked about the same process in one of the previous videos. When you keep on zooming out, you come to a point where you're thinking, well, I keep zooming out and it's the same shit happening again. So we can kind of see that as, okay, well, if I keep zooming out and the same stuff happens again, well, there's nothing more beyond that then. It's just the whole, like for example, there's it's gonna be a complex episode, this one, but there's a philosophy that we have God, for example, which is the creator of this universe, but there's also God beyond God. But those two are not separate. Like we are not separate from God. And the same principle is with God. So there's another creator above the creator, and above that creator there's another creator, and above that creator there's another creator, an endless continuum. And when you realize that, you have no reason to keep on looking into that, because you know I am where I am, and there's always going to be something above me, always going to be something to strive towards, you know. And as long as I'm present with what is, well, I'm in touch with Creator, and I am the creator of my life, and I am in alignment with my path.
It makes sense then that when the complexity increases as we ask more questions and zoom in or zoom out. I had a lot of philosophical conversations with people that got really, really sort of far, but also so far that it almost seemed meaningless. And that also helped me to realize that, hey, okay, then we can just reach a point where we can let go and just be and realize that we have a lot of opportunity right here, right now, to create. Yes, infinity is complex, or it's just so simple if we don't mess with it.
So now comes the question, how does judging affect us? And I think that when we judge, we become blinded. I mentioned this before, but we become blinded by our own individuality. And we kind of forget the greater self, the greater picture of everything. In that regard, we also do not listen very well to ourselves. We tend to miss out on opportunities and become a little bit short-sighted, in my experience, because I've judged many things. For example, when I stopped smoking, I started to judge people smoking instead, and that, you know, like gave me a short-sightedness. This was because my ego, my individual self, my contracted self, was not well prepared for this. I would guess. It's kind of egoic construct, and there are certain standards that I, in my constricted mind, thought was the right way of doing things, only to realize that there was a greater aspect, a greater picture of the greater self that I didn't consider inside of that egoic self, which brought me to this short-sightedness. And when you do that, you kind of shrink. Some people think you expand because, well, I'm putting myself above others, but in reality you're not, to put it simple. You're actually more or less judging people more because you found a way that worked for you, and now you think that everyone has to walk that path, or invite people to walk that path, and you skip the greater picture of everything.
Mm-hmm. I really also I can just nod when I hear you say that you miss out on opportunities because you limit yourself. I think to me it became quite clear that you limit yourself, especially because you miss out on opportunities. It's like, yeah, in the case of if we judge smokers, then does it mean that if a person smoking is offering a helping hand, or, you know, like having some idea, but you need to kind of be close to the smoker, and are you then gonna not accept it, even if a part of you actually would like to? It's so easy to just make things, yeah, not according to standard. Like, oh, my life is not this and that. And then there's so much we're not seeing. And this is, I mean, it's ongoing work. It's super relevant all the time. And I like to be reminded of this. I like this topic because it's really helpful to let go of this judgment. And it's relaxing to talk about letting go and talk about how we, I was going to say how we all, because that's almost all, at least we both experience it. So it's like, okay, nothing to be afraid about. It's something that happens, but we have options in how we learn from it. And that means maybe sometimes taking chances, not to let the judgment limit us on a continuous basis. Do something that I sometimes heard people say, just do something different. Do something, maybe something you're scared of, but at least do something different once in a while. Some people say every day. And that, I think, is an example of a method that can serve to expand us. The opposite of judging, letting judgment rule, is maybe going a bit against the usual.
Yeah, definitely. Which brings me to the question, how do we judge less? Like, how, if one wants to really be in a better state of being, like a more peaceful state, a more benevolent state of being, we'll have to probably get rid of judgment, or at least do something about the judgment that we experience in our life. Then I wonder, how do we judge less then? And how do we provide the answer for that to others as well, is what I'm thinking. One of the things that I'm thinking is simply awareness, in my own personal opinion. Because when you become aware of what judgment is, and you kind of see that if I judge myself, I judge others. If I judge others, I judge myself as well. Kind of see that, you and just become aware of that, you will have a natural tendency of navigating away from that, not being too involved with that. I think like that. I feel like I wanted to put more words on it, but I think I got it all. I think there was no need to say anything more about that, actually.
It's also I mean, that awareness is just so powerful, because with awareness you suddenly have options. No longer are you just being pulled in all sort of directions by your subconscious and surroundings. With awareness, you can take a look and be like, hey, what's going on? How would I like to react or respond? And yeah, I think it's a good answer, awareness. How can we judge less? Yeah, it's I don't know. I also feel like awareness is simply the answer, because it's kind of like, without it, we will not find out that we're judging. So it's interesting. More words can be put to it, but it's like not necessary. Of course, we can add maybe a little bit of a method for awareness, which could be asking questions. So asking curious questions about, so why don't I want to do that? Why don't I want to listen to that person? Or why do I want to do that? Why do I want to listen to that person? We can ask questions. That is a way to get into awareness.
Yeah, definitely. I would also say curiosity, investigation, especially in those people that trigger you, because that's a big judgment alert. Huh?
We're closing.
Oh, okay.
2 minutes.
Okay, right. Thank you. So, the library is closing a little bit sooner, so I'll have to go.
Yes.
But
I think it's a good one to end on.
yeah,
I enjoyed this episode. Yet another good episode. Thank you very much to my co-host Yeshua. I'm Patrick, and thank you to all listeners out there as well. This is a matter of trust.
see you.